The producer, writer, and director of an independent film shot in Oklahoma and the story of the Hominy Indians football team. That's next on Green Country Perspectives. You know, Oklahomans take football very seriously. Many consider themselves experts in the history of the game, but what they may not know is that there was a semi-pro Indian team right here in Oklahoma. Now, in the middle 1920s, the Hominy Indians played against amateur, semi-pro, and professional football teams from all around the country. This story is told in the film Playground of the Native Son. The producer of that film, Celia Xavier, is here to tell us all about it. Welcome.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you here. Before we get into the film itself, a little bit about you.
Okay.
You're from where?
I'm from all over. My father was in the military, as some people who can relate to that. So I lived all over the world. I lived in Europe and Asia. And I consider Hawaii my home, but I'm based in Tulsa and LA.
How in the world did you get into the film business?
Never dreamed I'd be doing this. Honestly, it wasn't something that was even on my radar. I was a fashion designer and dating an actor who told me to get into acting, which I did. That led to producing my own projects because I'm very impatient. And so then I got into producing documentaries. I was shown a bit of this footage of this team in the 1920s, and I didn't really think too much about it because I was working on another project and really focused on that project. So, but that's how I got into it.
So you were kind of familiar with the industry itself. I'm told, and by friends who were involved, that it's a dog-eat-dog business. It's really hard to make it.
I don't believe in that. I believe that you make your own success and that you create your own future. So I don't listen to that.
Any trouble with financing?
No, I did this one with help from the Osage Nation. I had a grant, and I also used a lot of my own personal money because I believed so much in this story, and I wanted to be the one to tell this story, and I didn't want anyone else to have that privilege. And I just fell in love with the whole idea that there was this professional football team back in the 20s that nobody has heard of. And even people who I talked to who were born and raised in Pawhuska, they've never heard this story. Or people in the next town over in Bartlesville who are in their 80s, they've never heard of this story.
You know, this is the home of Jim Thorpe, who made his mark in the world of sports.
Yes.
But we've also had a number of Indian folk who have likewise made a mark in sports and in so many other fields. And it just goes unheralded here at home. You know, when you get outside of Oklahoma, you hear about it, but you don't hear much about it here, and that really is too bad. Were there other teams that you came across other than this one?
Like this? Well, there was a lot of high school and college teams that came out of the boarding school situation. And
now let's discuss that for a minute.
Okay.
We're talking about Indian boarding schools, so they were controlled by the federal government.
The BIA.
Okay. So a lot of them had teams.
A lot of them had teams, and they were excelling at sports and especially football. And it was and they were like paraded around. These teams were doing so well, like the Haskell Indian team. They were doing so well, and they were used as an example as to how they were being civilized and how they were sort of, you know, blending into American society. So they kind of used that as PR for their schools.
Oh, I know, and you and I were talking about this earlier. In many cases, the children that were placed into these schools were punished if they spoke their own native tongue.
That's right.
And I mean, can you imagine trying to drop your native tongue, be assimilated and learn English, and then you're punished if you use your native tongue?
Yes. It's very sad what went on back then, and I think it's just, again, a testament to that will to survive. They took a bad situation and used it to survive, not only survive, but excel in these sports. And I find that alone, that story alone, is a whole nother documentary that I am going to be working on, but it makes you just proud, and it makes you realize and remember, you know, that the human force, that God's spirit in you is so strong. You cannot destroy it.
Well, I'm still curious to know how in the world a young woman who obviously came from a family that moved a lot got involved and said, you know what, I can do this. I can make this happen. You wrote it too, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Honestly, if I knew everything that I had to do, like back then, I probably would have a lot of fear, and that fear would probably stop me from doing it. But I have this interesting outlook on life. I always say yes to most things in life. And when I was asked to do a documentary by Chief Gray at the time about the Osage Reign of Terror, I had no idea how to do a documentary. I was like, you know, but I just said yes. I just said yes to it. When I was asked to do this by Van Bighorst, I just said yes, even though I have to admit I don't know anything about football. So I just know that as a filmmaker, great stories are hard to come by. They don't, you know, and I felt like this was one of the greatest untold stories ever.
Did you use local actors?
Yes, I did, and a couple of them are going to join us later today, Stacy No Fire and Joe Hawkins. Not only are they super talented, but their attitude is incredible, and I don't think I could have found these type of men if I had cast this in LA. You know, they're just men here in Oklahoma, and we don't have that, you know, and then you get that Hollywood actor a little bit there as well. And these guys are just so real and visceral, and, you know, I don't think I could have replaced them.
What's the running time on the film?
58.
So is it going to be seen everywhere, or is it limited distribution, or how does that going to work?
Well, I'm at a forkroads right now where I'm going to self-distribute right now just so I can make the Christmas deadline. And then I will go into distribution with a distributor.
All right. Well, it sounds to me like you're a young woman with a firm grasp on plans. We're going to take a short break.
Okay.
When we come back, you'll meet two of the actors involved in this film right after this.
If you can just imagine that if you've been told you can't do something, you can't do this, you're not capable, you're not qualified, you're the wrong color, and all of a sudden something happens that says that's not true. I can, and I will.
It was not a game, it was a battle. That's what this game was about. Our people have endured and thrived under abnormal circumstances, and we always have, we always will.
We were part of the early founding of the National Football League as a participating club.
A full roster of just Native Americans.
This was quite awesome for just a little town of 2,000, 3,000 people.
But the bad thing is, nobody knows.
The Hominy Indians put together a football team that could compete at the national level.
This is John Levi, then this is our dad, George. 1924 was when John made All-American. His athletic abilities were excellent.
He was an equivalent to Jim Thorpe. It's unfortunate somebody like that wasn't given the notoriety that he deserved.
You can imagine football in that day with no pads and no face mask, nothing.
Back then, I think it was more of a impact sport.
The Indians just have that drive in them to compete because maybe they were always the underdog.
That couldn't be taught. It was just natural.
These were tough men.
Nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible.
They won 26 consecutive games.
They just felt invincible.
They could do anything they put their hearts to.
The preparation, the people behind you.
These guys are giants, but we're going to conquer the giant.
Even his own family said it was just ridiculous. What are you trying to do, embarrass us?
They had a passion.
We've always been taught as a war group is that you're a team.
This was so much more than just a game. Now they had a chance to prove that not only were they capable of competing against the best team, the world champions, but worthy of being on the same field as them. Two great teams under one flag battling it out on the gridiron.
It's like a destiny, and that destiny is going to carry people's lives for generations to come.
They decided that if they started something, they would go all the way with it, and that's exactly what they did.
Here's our time, here's our chance. Let's get after it.
We're talking with Celia Xavier about the Hominy Indians and the film Playground of the Native Son. Now we're joined by two of the actors from that film, Joe Hawkins and Stacy Nofire. Guys, it's good to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
I've already talked with you a little bit, Celia, so I'm going to focus on these two fellows for just a little bit, and then we'll get all three of you involved. Joe, I'm going to start with you. What tribe are you?
Pawnee.
Wow, I had a good friend that was Pawnee.
Oh, really?
Good gracious sakes. Yeah. Where do you, are you from the Tulsa area?
Actually, I do reside in Pawnee now. Originally, before I didn't know. Much like Celia was attached to a military family. I was in a military family with my father, so we moved around quite frequently.
Yeah.
So I didn't necessarily, even though I'm originally from Pawnee, we didn't stay there. So I got to taste a little bit of everything, both in Germany and here stateside.
Right. I had a friend named Brummett Echohawk who was, he and I were very close and spent time at my home and I spent time at his. He and his wife Mary and my wife and I were buds. But he instructed me a great deal on the history of the tribe. And I found him to be both knowledgeable and insightful when he shared that information with a non-Indian such as myself. You guys come from a proud tribe. Did you play football?
Yes, sir, I did. I did play football in high school.
What position?
I was a offensive and defensive end and special teams. I did a lot on the line, defensive end, tackle, and guard mainly.
So you were familiar with the workings of a football team before Celia walked in and said, let's do this?
Yes, sir, I was. Not as knowledgeable as some of the guys on there that actually played college football, but I did know my way around the football field.
Which way to run?
Which way to run and you know, who to tackle when they had the football.
Stacy, what about you? What tribe?
Oh, I'm Cherokee. My family's from like Stillwell area, so just I also have a little Creek in me as well, but mostly Cherokee.
Proud heritage. You play football?
Yeah, I grew up playing football, like second grade all the way through college. I played for Haskell Indian Nations University, and then before that I graduated playing at Broken Arrow High School.
How did you hear about this film being put together? How did that come to pass?
I was told by my mother, who had been told by somebody else, and she just brought it up to me, hey, you want to try this out? And I was sure. I mean, I had been removed from football for a while at that point, so you know, just getting into playing around with it again was exciting enough.
Joe, what about you?
Actually, it's a similar story. My parents had actually seen it on TV when they casted about it. There was an interview done with Celia. At that point in time, they were still looking for actors. I wasn't going to go out for it, and at the beckon of my mother, my father, and then when my wife talked to me, I finally decided to go ahead and put in for it, and I was selected.
Did you guys audition on the same day?
Well, we did
Six.
show up to practice, but
I don't remember if we were there the same day or anything like that.
I don't
When'd you
believe
meet?
so.
The first day of practice. I don't remember the date.
So then they had practice, I guess you would have to have before a shoot.
Yeah, they wanted to be able to make sure we knew the general idea of what we were going to be doing, like on screen and everything. So like he wrote up plays and everything for us to practice on. So we kind of had like the basic idea of what they wanted to convey.
Had either one of you ever heard of this team before you got involved in the film?
No, sir.
You know, I'd only like barely like knew that it existed but I didn't know the story or anything. Like I said, I went to Haskell Indian Nation, so it's all native school anyway. So they like to try and tell us, you know, a little bit about those things like that, like the history of our native people, history of native people in sports, business, everything like that. So I'd heard of the team existing, but I didn't know about the story at all.
I don't want to give away too much here, but two questions come to mind. One, first of all, what position did you play in the film?
I played quarterback for the Haskell team, Hominy team.
And what about you?
I played the left guard.
This is more than a story about an Indian football team, isn't it? There is more to it than that.
Yes.
Without giving away too much. And believe me, Celia will pop you with a shoe if you go over the line. But can you kind of give us an idea of what to expect if we see this? A little bit about the plot, perhaps?
You'll see just like drive of a people. You know, it's ambition. You know, people aspiring to do great things, overcoming, you know, tribulations and things like that. Just empowering people. Makes you feel good.
A couple of words come to mind. It's awe-inspiring, to say the least. To see something that we've been led to believe, you know, that you'll never amount to anything, to doing great deeds, and it's caught on film.
You know, it's interesting to me. From time to time, I watch Brian Gumbel on HBO. There's something about the way he handles his show and his interviews and his stories where he actually takes you, you feel as though you've been taken back in time. You've met the player. You feel the circumstances of the environment that that player existed in. Did you guys ever, and work with me on this, but did you ever sense the ghosts of that original team kind of watching over you while you were making this?
Yes, very much so.
Definitely. They took us out to these fields and had us, like, told us stories and got us all mentally prepared into the time frame and like what the stories were behind the guys, and then they had us go out in like early mornings. And it was fun. It was like you could just feel it, the energy of the guys.
One of the, and I don't think I'm talking out of school here, Celia, but one of the things that struck me was here's a little semi-pro team in Oklahoma, outback Oklahoma, if you will. And we got a couple of young players, and you guys are going up against the New York Giants, a pro team. When did you realize that was coming? You know, early on, when they told you the story?
Yeah, like it's like first day they wanted to make sure we knew what we were doing.
Holy Toledo, that's got to be.
It was exciting. It made it a lot more exciting.
Yeah, really,
to do.
to come from dirt poor Oklahoma to face a major team. And back then, these guys played in real thin helmets, so they had to be rough on the field. And I guess the young Indian players were too, weren't they?
You
just
had
as
to
tough
be
as anybody else.
physically you had to be very tough and mentally as well to keep going after you got hit, because there's not much to them.
Not much there to protect you.
Not much at all. These guys have got it made now that play modern day football.
You know, there is a story. Well, in fact, there was a book written about it when the late President Dwight Eisenhower played on a team that faced the late Jim Thorpe. And Eisenhower was quoted as saying he was the best athlete he'd ever seen in his life. And he was playing on the field with a bum knee, and Thorpe ran like a racehorse every time he got his hands on the ball. And he said, I'd never seen anything like that in my life. Did you guys get a sense of what these players might have been like when you read about them?
Yeah, like they had films of, like, they had different clips of, like, John Levi, one of the players on the team, you know, running down the field, and like you can just see the way they run. There's so much power, and like they were faster, stronger, it seemed like, than their opponents, because I mean they were native athletes, so
yeah,
we're pretty naturally gifted.
Wow. Well, I'm not quite sure where we are on time, but we're going to take another break here, and when we come back, I want to involve all three of you in it, because I'm curious. I got a couple of questions about the process of taking two young men who obviously didn't set out to be actors, and now are one. You know how
Yes.
that story goes. And we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll hear more from these three folks and a little bit more about the movie itself. We're back. Celia, let me ask you a question here. When you first saw these young men, did you know then that these guys were the right ones for the film?
Honestly, it was a combination of their looks and their attitude was huge. Who could, you know, fill out their application and get it in on time and follow direction was a big one also.
Really?
But the other thing, this had to do with our budget. We were only given so many uniforms. The uniforms had to be flown in from LA, and I only had a certain amount of uniforms in certain sizes. So they had to fit into these uniforms as well, and the shoes, right? Because we were short like a uniform or something, and so we were like trading. And it was such a huge part of my budget, these uniforms, and I got a lot of flack for it. But when my line producer saw these guys in uniform practicing, he turned to me and said, "Oh, now I understand why you were so crazy about the uniforms." You know.
When you guys, you've seen the film, the finished product. I'm not going to ask you if you're pleased with your work, because most actors never are. But were you pleased with the film?
Very much.
Yeah.
Is it a good piece of history?
I would definitely say it is astonishing, to say the least. I mean, it is a very, very informational piece of history that needs to be brought out.
That's a good endorsement right there. Now, we got just a little bit of time to talk about this fact, and I know we're sitting on the cusp of something that could explode right in front of us. You haven't shopped this yet to the networks, and you're doing this as a one-man band. You're producer, you're director, you're writer, you're marketing, you're everything. And you've made contact with these young men who are local, and they've worked a film. They've obviously been touched by your efforts. And you seem to be incredibly motivated now to get the word out. When does this screening take place?
We have a Tulsa screening at the Circle Cinema, October the 10th at 7:30. That's where the cast and crew are going to be there for a Q&A afterwards. And it's going to be playing for a limited run for at least a week, maybe longer. But then it goes on
at the Circle Cinema?
At the Circle Cinema in Tulsa. But after that, it goes to New York City, the Lincoln Center, November the 20th.
Sweet.
And but I do wish that this, we have a DVD by Christmas, because I need to be working on the feature film version of this story. That's where I need to put my energy.
What will be different with the feature film?
We go more into...
Because this is more of a documentary,
yes.
isn't it?
Very little was known about this story. There was very little, so we had to recreate some stuff in the documentary, just like some of the plays and stuff. But in the feature film, the whole background of the players, that has to be kind of created and made up, and so that'll be fictionalized. And we can also get more into all the different games that they played. We can explore that and all the things that they went through, that we think they went through. We can imagine they went through, actually.
I got to ask you, we got about 2 minutes, and I've got to ask you this question.
Yes.
When they took on the New York Giants,
Yes.
is there any word of mouth passed down through generations of those team members of how those young men felt going up against a championship team, or was it just another game to them?
No, I think they were, it was a big deal. I mean, they were, they got a lot of flack from the people, their family, their tribe, like, you know, what do you think you're doing? You're going to embarrass us, you know, because they thought they were going to lose going up against this team. And they were scared. They were actually a little, you know, a little bit scared about this huge, this huge game. But they just obviously, you know, you'll have to see the movie, the docudrama, to see what happened.
So this is part one. This sets the stage for the motion picture itself.
Right, and there's also a prequel that I'm working on, which covers how this team came into existence.
Got it. And one more time, we're talking about the Circle Cinema, and when is it?
October the 10th, 7:30 is where it starts, is opening night for at least a minimum 1 week run.
And how much are tickets?
I'm not sure. About $10, something like that.
Something like that. Well, it sounds to
Not
me
much.
a worthwhile project. And guys, I want to thank you both for taking time to come in. I know at your age you'd rather be out doing other things instead of talking to an old crony like me, but believe me, any way that you can portray the Indian people of this state and get the message of the people across to non-Indians, if you'll pardon the expression, it's a feather in your cap, gentlemen. My thanks to you. See, thank you for coming in, child.
Thank you so much.
Look forward to seeing this. We're all out of time for this segment of Green Country Perspectives. If you get questions, comments, or program ideas, let us know about it. And thank you for joining us on RSU Public Television.